My name is Valerie. I am 62 years old, and my occupation is a retired high school administrator. I spent 35 years walking the halls of our local schools, breaking up fights, counseling troubled teens, and building a life of respect and stability. I lost my husband when we were both far too young, leaving me to raise our only son, Jamal, completely on my own. I sacrificed my youth, working double shifts and skipping vacations to make sure my boy never wanted for anything. Through sheer grit and endless prayer, I managed to pay off a beautiful 4-bedroom generational home in a quiet, modern suburb. It was my sanctuary. I honestly believed my golden years would be filled with nothing but peace gardening and the quiet joy of a job well done. But a mother's love can sometimes blind her to the harsh realities growing right under her own roof. I opened my home to help them get on their feet, only for my daughter-in-law to pack the house with her relatives and banish me to the living room couch. I laid there in the dark, listening to her smirk upstairs, boasting about how she had finally stolen my kingdom. But honey, she had no idea about the brutal legal trap I was already setting. The physical pain in my lower back woke me up at 2 a.m. I was curled up on a lumpy, sagging couch in the very living room I had decorated with my own 2 hands. Upstairs, the ceiling groaned under the weight of heavy boots and loud, disrespectful laughter. It was my daughter-in-law, Chloe, along with her brother Travis and her sister Becky. They were drinking my good wine and treating my master suite like a cheap party house. Just 2 months ago, Jamal had begged me to let him and his wife stay with me for a short while, after Chloe maxed out their credit cards and lost her job. Against my better judgment, I gave them my master bedroom because I wanted them to be comfortable. I thought I was giving my son a temporary safety net to save for a down payment. Instead, I gave a viper the keys to my castle. The disrespect started the moment they moved in, but lying there shivering in my own home, while my son did absolutely nothing to defend me, the final veil fell from my eyes. Jamal was my entire world. After his father passed away from a sudden illness when Jamal was just a little boy, I poured every single ounce of my energy into making sure he had a bright future. I worked for the local school district for 35 long years. During the day, I was in the administrative office, keeping troubled teens on the right track and managing a mountain of paperwork. But one salary was not enough to build the life I envisioned for my son. So I took on a second shift, running the evening adult education program. I was exhausted beyond measure. My feet swelled and my back ached relentlessly, but I never uttered a single complaint. Every extra dollar I earned went straight into a dedicated savings account. I was determined to put him through accounting school without him taking out a single student loan. When Jamal finally crossed that university stage to receive his degree, I cried tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I felt that all those years of giving up my own youth had finally bloomed into something beautiful. My home was my other great pride and joy. It is a spacious 4-bedroom house in a quiet, modern neighborhood. I managed to pay off the mortgage 5 years early through sheer financial discipline. I kept that house immaculate. The hardwood floors were always polished to a shine, and the living room felt like a warm embrace. It was my absolute sanctuary, a place of peace and stability that I built from the ground up to be a generational anchor for our family. My love for Jamal was absolute and entirely blind. I saw him as the perfect son, the boy who would carry on our family legacy with honor and integrity. I gave him the absolute best parts of me, truly believing that a mother's endless devotion would naturally be returned with respect and care when she reached her golden years. I never stopped to realize that giving someone the entire world sometimes teaches them to simply take it for granted. Then came Chloe. When Jamal first brought her home, she played the part of the sweet and grateful daughter-in-law to absolute perfection. She praised my cooking, endlessly complimented the pristine condition of my home, and eagerly called me Mum with a bright, beaming smile. I wanted my son to be happy, so I welcomed her into our family with wide open arms, truly believing he had found a supportive partner for life. But that charming facade began to crack shortly after they tied the knot. Chloe developed incredibly expensive tastes that an entry-level accountant's salary simply could not support. She constantly needed the newest designer handbags, the luxury car leases, and the lavish weekend getaways. Eventually, the inevitable reality crashed down on them. Chloe lost her job due to constant attendance issues, and instead of cutting back on her spending, she secretly maxed out all of their shared credit cards to maintain her fabricated lifestyle. They hit complete financial ruin and were facing eviction. Jamal came to my house in tears, looking completely broken and defeated. He sat at my kitchen table, holding his head in his hands, and begged me for salvation. He pleaded with his voice trembling that they just needed a place to stay for 6 months. Just 6 months to pay off this massive debt and save up for a down payment on a modest place. He told me they had nowhere else to go. My maternal instinct naturally kicked into overdrive. Against my better judgment and that quiet, nagging whisper of intuition, warning me to protect my hard-earned peace, I opened my doors to them. I wanted them to feel fully welcome and supported during their rough patch. I went so far as to pack up my own belongings and moved myself out of the master suite. I gave them the largest bedroom in the house with the beautiful attached bath, simply because I wanted my son and his wife to be as comfortable as possible while they got back on their feet. I genuinely thought I was offering a temporary safety net for my struggling child. I did not realize I was handing over the keys to my sanctuary to a woman who had every intention of claiming my kingdom as her own. The honeymoon phase of our new living arrangement barely lasted 60 days. I started noticing the subtle shifts first. Chloe stopped saying thank you when I cooked dinner. Then she started rolling her eyes when I asked her to use coasters on the antique mahogany tables my late husband bought for us. But the real nightmare began on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen fixing a pot of gumbo when the front door swung open. Chloe walked in, followed by a tall, scruffy-looking man and a young blonde woman carrying 3 massive duffel bags. Chloe casually announced that her brother Travis and her sister Becky had hit a rough patch with their landlord. She told me they just needed to crash in my spare rooms for a few days until they figured things out. She did not ask. She informed me. I looked at Jamal, expecting him to step up and establish boundaries in his mother's home. Instead, he stared at his shoes and mumbled that family has to help family. I bit my tongue and nodded, keeping the peace for the sake of my son. A few days quickly dragged into a few weeks. Travis and Becky took over the remaining guest rooms upstairs, like a pair of invading conquerors. They treated my beautiful home like a cheap motel. Becky would leave her dirty laundry piled up in the hallway, and one morning she actually had the audacity to snap her fingers at me, pointing to her basket and asking if I knew how to separate the whites from the colors. Travis was even worse. I would spend my Sunday afternoons meal prepping my healthy dinners for the week, only to wake up and find Travis had devoured everything, leaving the empty plastic containers sitting right on the kitchen counter. When I gently brought this up to Chloe, she acted like I was the one being unreasonable. The final straw of this invasion came when Chloe cornered me in the hallway and declared that Travis had a bad knee and could no longer walk up the stairs. She told me it made the most sense for me to give up my downstairs sewing room and move to the living room couch so Travis could be comfortable. I pulled Jamal into the kitchen, away from his wife, and pleaded with him to see reason. I told him this was my home, and I was being pushed out of my own spaces. My strong, educated son looked at me with weak, defeated eyes and begged me to just compromise. "Mum, just compromise," he whispered, rubbing the back of his neck. "It is only temporary, and I cannot handle Chloe being stressed out right now." It broke my heart to see the boy I sacrificed my youth for acting so spineless. I swallowed my pride, packed up my sewing room, and dragged my blankets down to the living room couch. My intuition was screaming at me that this was no longer about helping them get back on their feet. This was a hostile takeover. Sleeping on that old living room couch was pure agony for a woman my age. Every morning I woke up with my joints aching and my lower back burning from the lumpy, sagging cushions. But the physical pain was absolutely nothing compared to the daily emotional humiliations I was forced to endure. I became a prisoner in the very sanctuary I had spent 35 years working double shifts to pay off. One evening, I came home exhausted from running errands and sat down to watch my favorite gospel program. It was my only slice of peace for the day. Barely 10 minutes in, Travis came stomping down the stairs in his dirty socks. He stood over me, blocking the television, and told me I needed to keep the TV down or turn it off entirely because he was trying to take a nap. He did not say please. He spoke to me like I was a rebellious teenager in his house. I looked over at the dining table where Jamal was sitting with his laptop. Jamal heard every single word. My son. The boy who used to promise he would buy me the world one day simply lowered his head and pretended to type. He let another man disrespect his mother in her own living room. The agonizing realization washed over me like freezing water. Jamal was completely under Chloe's control. He was a hollow shell of the strong, independent man I had raised him to be. Whenever Chloe wanted something, Jamal scrambled to make it happen, regardless of how it affected me. Chloe began replacing my family photos on the mantel with cheap decorations she bought online. She threw away my expensive floral arrangements because she said they smelled too old. I started shrinking myself, making myself smaller and quieter, just to avoid the constant conflict. I walked through the hallways like a ghost, holding my breath, so I would not disturb the white relatives who had hijacked my kingdom. The tension in the air was so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. I was walking on eggshells, afraid to use my own kitchen, afraid to turn on my own television, and afraid to speak up because it only pushed my son further away. I felt completely stripped of my dignity, but the universe has a funny way of revealing the truth when you are finally ready to handle it. It happened on a cold Friday night. I was lying on the living room couch, facing the back cushions, wrapped tightly in my blankets. The house was completely dark, and I was perfectly still, trying to force my aching back to relax. Around midnight, I heard the heavy thud of footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Chloe, Travis, and Becky. They walked right past the couch, assuming I was fast asleep. They went straight into the kitchen, opened a bottle of my expensive wine, and sat around the island. In the quiet of the night, their voices carried clearly across the open floor plan. I kept my breathing steady and slow, listening closely to every word. Chloe was laughing. It was a cruel, mocking sound that made my stomach turn. Travis asked her how much longer they had to play nice with the old lady. Chloe let out a loud snort. She boasted about how incredibly easy it was to manipulate Jamal. She laughed, telling her siblings that Jamal was so desperate to keep her happy and avoid arguments that he did not even look at the mail or the bank statements anymore. He is practically a golden retriever. She chuckled, taking a sip of wine. Then the conversation took a turn that made my blood run absolutely cold. Becky asked about the house, wondering if they were going to sell it. Chloe lowered her voice, but I heard her crystal clear. She revealed her true master plan. She bragged to her brother and sister that she had been secretly practicing my signature for weeks. She told them she had successfully forged my signature on a comprehensive power of attorney document and a quitclaim deed, transferring the ownership of my generational home directly to her. I laid there, frozen in terror, as the gravity of her words hit me. Chloe then said the sentence that will be burned into my memory for the rest of my life. Once these get filed on Friday, the house is legally mine. We will declare the old lady incompetent and dump her in that cheap state facility across town. My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. The daughter-in-law I had welcomed, the woman I gave my master bedroom to, was actively plotting to steal my life savings and lock me away in a run-down state facility to rot. She wanted to erase me from the earth. For a brief second, a wave of unbearable grief washed over me. I wanted to cry out for my late husband. I wanted to scream at the ceiling and ask what I had done to deserve such a monumental betrayal. But the tears never came. They dried up before they could even form. As I lay there listening to the clinking of their wine glasses, something deep inside my soul shifted. The grief and the shock completely evaporated. In their place, a cold, calculated, and magnificent rage began to take root. I realized I was dealing with absolute predators. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed because I was a quiet, older black woman who loved her son that I was weak and foolish. They thought my silence was surrender. They did not know the absolute fire that burns inside a mother who built her empire from scratch. I did not move a single muscle that night. I stayed on that lumpy couch, breathing quietly and letting them enjoy their stolen wine. I let them think they had won. But as the sun began to peek through the living room blinds, I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior preparing for battle, and I was about to teach Chloe and her family a lesson in survival they would never forget. I did not confront them right then and there. When you are dealing with snakes, you do not stomp your feet and warn them you are coming. You step lightly and you sharpen your shovel. The next morning I woke up and folded my blankets just like I had done every day since they forced me out of my own bedroom. I dragged my feet as I walked into the kitchen, deliberately making myself look older, tired, and utterly defeated. Chloe was sitting at my kitchen island, drinking her expensive coffee. She gave me a sickly sweet smile and asked how my back was feeling. I looked down at the floor, sighed deeply, and told her it was just the arthritis acting up. She patted my arm condescendingly and told me to just take it easy. Oh, I was going to take it easy, all right. As soon as Chloe and her brother left the house for the day, I went straight to work. My first call was to Mr. Harrison. He had been my trusted attorney for over 20 years, and he helped me and my late husband draft our very first wills. I sat in his pristine downtown office and laid out every single agonizing detail. I told him about the disrespect, the invasion of my home, and the chilling conversation I had overheard the night before regarding the forged power of attorney and the quitclaim deed. Mr. Harrison listened with a stony expression. He immediately tapped into his network and checked the county records. Sure enough, Chloe had attempted to initiate the transfer process using a poorly forged version of my signature. Mr. Harrison looked at me and said, "Valerie, we are going to let her file those documents because the moment she officially submits them, she crosses the line from a nasty daughter-in-law into a convicted felon to completely neutralize her little master plan." Mr. Harrison and I quickly executed a brilliant legal maneuver. We legally transferred my generational home and all my primary assets into an ironclad, irrevocable trust. Mr. Harrison explained that putting the house in an irrevocable trust was the ultimate shield. It meant I was legally untouchable. I felt a tremendous weight lift off my weary shoulders as I signed those trust documents. I was securing the legacy I had broken my back to build. By doing this, I legally removed the house from my personal name. That meant any document Chloe forged with my personal signature was now completely useless. She was trying to steal a house that technically belonged to a trust she had absolutely no access to. But I needed more than just a legal checkmate. I needed airtight, undeniable proof of the rot that had infected my home. I hired a private security technician who discreetly installed tiny motion-activated cameras, disguised as phone chargers and air fresheners, right in my home office and the living room. I wanted to see exactly what they were doing when I was not around. The footage I reviewed over the next few days made my stomach turn. I watched crystal clear video of Travis sneaking into my home office in the middle of the night. He used a butter knife to pry open my locked desk drawer and casually stuffed my emergency cash into his pockets. I even watched him pocket a pair of gold hoop earrings my late husband had given me for our 10th anniversary. He laughed to himself as he did it, completely unaware that his little late-night robbery was being broadcast directly to my phone in high definition. I sat on my lumpy couch, watching these people treat my hard-earned life like an all-you-can-eat buffet. My heart bled for Jamal. But the mother who would blindly protect him had died the night I heard his wife plotting to lock me away. I forwarded every single video clip directly to Mr. Harrison. We were building an impenetrable fortress of evidence. I smiled quietly to myself as I served them dinner that week, knowing the trap was perfectly set and the jaws were ready to snap shut. Chloe was completely unaware of the massive legal avalanche heading straight for her. Believing she had successfully pulled off the ultimate scam, her arrogance reached unimaginable heights. She strutted around my house, giving orders to her siblings and treating my son like a personal servant. Then she decided it was time to mark her territory in front of her entire family. Chloe waltzed into the living room one afternoon and casually announced that she was throwing a massive housewarming party and family reunion for her side of the family that upcoming weekend. She actually called it a housewarming party in a house that I had owned and paid off for over 30 years. She invited aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends from all over the state to come and celebrate her gorgeous new home. I watched her order expensive floral arrangements and catered food using credit cards that Jamal was desperately trying to pay off. She was throwing a victory parade to celebrate stealing my kingdom. The morning of the party was a chaotic nightmare. Caterers were carrying massive trays of food into my kitchen, and Travis was loudly setting up a sound system on my back patio. I was sitting quietly on the living room couch, sipping my morning tea and watching the circus unfold. Chloe walked downstairs wearing a stunning white sundress, looking like she did not have a single care in the entire world. She stopped in the middle of the living room and let out a heavy, dramatic sigh when she saw me. She crossed her arms and glared at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. She reached into her designer purse, pulled out a crisp $50 bill, and tossed it onto the coffee table right in front of me. She looked me dead in the eye and told me to go find a cheap motel for the weekend. She said her family was coming to see her beautiful new house, and having me sitting around on the couch looking gloomy would completely ruin the vibe of her party. She told me to take the cash grabber bag and make myself scarce until Sunday evening. The sheer audacity of this woman handing me $50 to vacate my own home was staggering. I slowly turned my head and looked at Jamal. My only son was standing right there by the kitchen island. He heard his wife banish his own mother from her house for the weekend. I waited for him to speak up. I waited for him to finally find his spine and tell his wife that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The sting of his silence was a different kind of pain. This was the boy I had stayed up with when he had fevers. The boy I had worked double shifts for, so he could walk across that graduation stage with a clean slate. I had poured my entire life force into making him a man of character. And yet here he stood, reduced to a trembling shadow in his own mother's kitchen. He chose a life of cowardly submission over the woman who gave him life. He simply looked down at the hardwood floor, shifting his weight from side to side, avoiding my gaze entirely. He abandoned me to keep his toxic wife happy. That silent cowardice was the last nail in the coffin. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply picked up that $50 bill and smoothed it out with my fingers. I looked at Chloe with a calm, knowing smile that I am sure confused her. I told her that was a wonderful idea, and that I could certainly use a relaxing weekend away from the house. I calmly walked up the stairs to the guest room, grabbed a small overnight bag, and packed a few essential items. When I walked back downstairs, the music was already blaring from the backyard, and more of her relatives were pouring through my front door, admiring the high ceilings and the expensive furniture I had worked decades to afford. I walked right past them with my head held incredibly high. Chloe was standing by the door holding a glass of champagne. I paused right in front of her, looked her directly in the eyes, and told her to enjoy the party. I told her to celebrate hard, because this weekend would be a milestone she would remember for the absolute rest of her life. She smirked and took a sip of her drink, completely oblivious to the double meaning behind my words. I walked out of my front door and got into my car. As I drove down my quiet suburban street, I did not feel a single ounce of sadness. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Harrison. I told him the guests had arrived and the stage was perfectly set. It was finally time to drop the hammer. I waited exactly 4 hours before I made my return. I did not spend those hours crying in some cheap motel room like my daughter-in-law had ordered me to do. Instead, I checked into a luxury downtown hotel, took a long hot shower, and put on my favorite tailored crimson suit. I applied my boldest red lipstick and styled my hair to absolute perfection. I was not walking back into my house as a defeated old woman. I was walking in as the queen reclaiming her castle. I pulled up to my driveway right as the sun began to set. Cars lined the street for blocks. I could hear the heavy bass of the music vibrating through my own front windows. I waited by the curb until Attorney Harrison pulled up right on schedule. 2 marked police cruisers followed closely behind him, parking right on my freshly cut lawn. I did not care about the grass. I cared about sending a message. I stepped out of my car and led the way up my front steps. I pushed the heavy oak door wide open without knocking. The living room was packed with people I had never seen before in my life, holding drinks and laughing. Right in the center of the room stood Chloe. She had a crystal champagne flute raised high in the air, making a toast to her gathered family. She was beaming, boasting about how blessed she was to finally own such a beautiful piece of real estate. She was telling everyone how hard she and Jamal had worked to buy it. The absolute delusion of her speech made my blood boil, but I maintained my regal composure. I walked straight into the center of the room, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Attorney Harrison walked on my right, and the 2 uniformed officers stepped in right behind me. The heavy silence fell over the room instantly. The music was abruptly shut off. Chloe lowered her glass, her face turning pale as she saw the police. She immediately tried to play the sweet, innocent victim. She rushed forward, forcing a nervous laugh, and asking what was going on and why my friends were disrupting her housewarming party. Attorney Harrison did not miss a single beat. He unzipped his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of legally binding documents. He loudly announced to the entire room that he was serving a 24-hour emergency eviction notice for Travis, Becky, and Chloe. Chloe began to scream that this was her house, now that she had the paperwork filed, and that I was just a confused senior citizen who did not know what I was talking about. I did not waste my breath arguing with a thief. I simply walked over to the smart television in the living room and used my phone to cast the hidden camera footage directly to the enormous screen. I pressed play and cranked the volume up to maximum. The entire room watched in stunned silence as the crystal-clear night vision video showed Travis prying open my desk drawer and stuffing my emergency cash and my anniversary gold hoop earrings into his pockets. Then the video switched to the audio recording. Chloe's own voice echoed through the speakers, bragging about forging my signature on a power of attorney document and a quitclaim deed. Her recorded voice laughed about dumping me in a cheap state facility across town. The color completely drained from Chloe's face. The smug, arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. The relatives who had been cheering for her just moments before began to back away, looking at her with absolute disgust. The two police officers immediately stepped forward. One officer grabbed Travis by the arm, reading him his rights and placing him in handcuffs for grand theft. The other officer moved straight toward Chloe. She tried to back away, stammering that it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just joking around. The officer did not care about her excuses. The sharp click of the handcuffs echoing in my living room was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Chloe was arrested on the spot for felony forgery and elder financial abuse. The partygoers did not stick around to say goodbye. They grabbed their coats and fled my house in complete embarrassment, leaving their half-empty drinks scattered across my tables. Within 10 minutes, the grand housewarming party was over. Jamal had been standing in the corner the entire time, watching his wife and brother-in-law get hauled away like common criminals. He finally snapped out of his trance and fell to his knees right in front of me. Tears were streaming down his face as he begged for my forgiveness. He sobbed that he did not know about the forged deeds, and that he never would have let her put me in a state facility. I looked down at my only son with a broken but incredibly firm heart. I told him he might not have known about the forgery, but he absolutely knew his wife banished his mother to a lumpy couch. He allowed his mother to be treated like a dog in the very house she built to give him a better life. I told Jamal that his silence was just as loud as her betrayal. I pointed to the front door and told my son to pack his bags and get out of my house. He cried and pleaded, but my decision was final. He chose his toxic wife over his mother, and now he had to live with the consequences of that choice. He dragged his suitcases out into the dark street completely alone. The very next morning, I had a locksmith come out and change every single lock on the property. I thoroughly cleaned my home, erasing every trace of their disrespect. I walked upstairs and laid down in my own comfortable bed in my master suite. I was finally at peace, completely owning my space, my sanctuary, and my dignity once again. I sit here now in the quiet comfort of my beautiful living room, surrounded by the things I worked so hard to earn, and I realize just how much this horrific nightmare has changed me. I learned the very hard way that bringing someone into your home does not mean you are bringing them into your heart. Sometimes the very people you sacrifice the most for are simply biding their time, just waiting for the perfect moment to bleed you dry. I gave my son my entire youth, and he repaid my devotion with silence when I needed his voice the most. Blood might technically make you related, but true respect and unwavering loyalty are what actually make you family. You must never let anyone, not even your own flesh and blood, steal your hard-earned peace or make you feel small in the magnificent kingdom you built. If my personal journey resonated with your heart today, and you truly felt my deep pain, but also celebrated my ultimate victory, please take a quick moment to hit that like button. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel so you can join our amazing community for many more incredible stories of hidden truth and absolute justice. I would absolutely love to hear from each and every one of you in the comments section down below. Please let me know exactly where you are watching from today and what time it is right now over there in your part of the world. I really want to know just how far my story of standing up to toxic family has traveled across the globe. Thank you all so much for listening to my truth. Stay blessed, stay incredibly strong, and always protect your peace.